And gentlemen, looks like the number, I think it's like number 2 right now, maybe number 4. Somebody within the top 5 Kurobots, Glaive Kyo, is back at it again with another video. And boy, oh boy, is it on a pretty familiar topic. It's about how Genshin Impact, instead of selling you happiness, instead of selling you quality products, they only sell you disappointment. And with all the news regarding 6.0, with things like exploration quality of life, with things like reworks to elements being tied to the newest characters, what else can there be other than disappointment, especially with how the trajectory of this game has gone? So why don't we go ahead, see what he has to share regarding the matter, and give our own take on this phenomenon.
There is a strange contradiction at the heart of Genshin Impact. On one hand, it is one of the most successful games ever made. A massive, beautifully crafted open world that you can, for the most part.
Is he playing RuneScape music? This is where you go when you're like trying to go to that place to like fish lobsters, right? You got to go to like a port, and then you take the boat, and then you end up at the place where you can fish lobsters, right? Port Sarim? Yeah, that's where this music is, right? Port Sarim, right?
Entirely for free. On the other hand, though, its community often seems to be in a constant state of frustration, locked in a cycle of high expectations and deep disappointment. Or, you know, sometimes it's low expectations and they get disappointed anyway. It's a complex issue, okay? And you see this captured all the time by content creators who break down the latest developer livestream and point out this strange disconnect between what the company says and what the players actually experience. It raises a fundamental question: why does this keep happening? Are these just a series of unforced errors from a developer that is out of touch, or is there something more deliberate at play? This video is an attempt to look past the day-to-day drama and to understand that question, to examine the Hoyoverse paradox, and to figure out if these constant contradictions are a flaw in their business model, or...
I think Glaive is bringing up a pretty reasonable point over here, right? This idea that every single decision that seems to come out from the company, it almost seems to contradict all of the stuff that they're actively saying in the public. Maybe this is just like a really big hone-in on that one quote from the dev, where they said, Genshin isn't even trying to make money anymore, as they release some of the most predatory stuff the game has ever seen. Let's just be real here. I don't think that there's anybody that buys that. And it makes you wonder, it makes you ask the question to yourself, why would they even say that in the first place? I think that is a pretty key topical area to explore. I'm excited to see what the glue is.
If they are the business model itself, ooh. It has been lingering for a long time, this problem, and one we will be exploring a lot on this channel. So if you're interested in more discussions that take a critical look at the problems in the gacha space, consider liking the video and subscribing because it helps a lot. But to start, you need to understand the official...
Who's making those? Who's doing that? That is somebody going into like fucking Gary's mod, importing the models for the Wuthering Waves characters, and then doing that.
Story Hoyoverse tells the world. You have to first look at their public philosophy. It is built on 2 core ideas that, on the surface, they sound pretty good. The first is the image of the benevolent developer, a narrative Hoyoverse often projects about itself. This has led to a deeply sarcastic meme within the community nowadays. Genshin does not want to make money.
Okay, I knew it.
I mean, who says that? Am I right? But it's now precisely to highlight the massive gap between that official narrative and the game's actual practices. Looking at their revenue, which sailed past $4 billion way back in 2022. And last month, they made like, what, 50 million or something?
Just on mobile.
Mobile alone? You can understand the blatant rage bait these devs are trying to do. But the reason this narrative probably has any legs at all is probably because Hoyoverse does some things that other companies in this space kinda rarely do. For example, think about cosmetic skins. Most live service games, and I'm not talking about the big 3 or the big 4, right? I'm talking about generally most live service games, they flood their shops with new outfits constantly because it's easy money. In Genshin, a new skin is a rare event. They give some away for free and almost always tie the paid ones into a story. The perception it gives is that they value the world's integrity more than a quick buck.
He's not wrong, because it's kind of like you only need to look at both like the past Hoyoverse titles, look at Zenless Zone 0, and then also look at Honkai Impact 3rd. The number of skins in those games is like kind of ridiculous, to the point where like ZZZ has literally had numerous skins released that are releasing alongside the new character. That to me is a dynamic that I find to be really, really, really off. where they released the new character and then also a skin for that new character in the same update, which is like, wouldn't you want skins to be for the older characters that people already have to like incentivize spending from that part of the player base? That's what you would assume. But it's just like their skin philosophy in general doesn't really seem to make that much sense. Because there's no skins in HSR, there's no skins in Genshin. Okay, there's like 1 or 2 skins in HSR, but they don't really fucking count. Yeah, there's no skins in Genshin, except once in a while. And then in ZZZ, they're going like overboard, and then it almost doesn't make sense, the release cycle. So yeah, this whole topic over here, very, very, very confusing. Oh, they have the Firefly skin. Oh, right, that piece of shit. I haven't actually seen somebody use that. Ambi not getting a skin when she's the poster child is crazy. Oh, no, they did. They gave Ambi a skin. It's just, you had to... It's just a 5-star limited character. Yeah, they gave Ambi a skin. You gotta spend like 160 pulls to get it.
More than a quick buck. The same goes for giving a free 5-star character.
I see, okay.
The effect is an image of a developer focused on the art, not on squeezing every last dollar out of you. This is an image. Remember, this is an image. You need to hear me out here. The second image of their philosophy is the no excessive anxiety doctrine.
Glaive right now is providing all of like the glue in regards to how Hoyoverse frames itself as a developer in its games, right? It's like, oh, we're above all of that. We're too good to be doing all of, like, the desperate stuff that these other games are doing. But this whole, like, philosophy that Glaive is talking about absolutely falls apart when you simply look at the other Hoyoverse games and what they're doing. Genshin's going ahead, trying to paint itself as, like, above their peers because they're not desperate enough to be releasing skins super frequently across their games. But then they're going to go ahead and do the literal, exact, complete opposite in Zenless Zone Zero. And so it almost makes it look like this company is, like, not unified. They don't have, like, a singular sort of message. And ZZZ's skin release cycle directly sort of like washes away any sense of like superiority that Hoyo was trying to drive with their Genshin skin strategy. So it's kind of just like, yeah, your own worst enemy actually turns out to be yourself.
This one comes directly from the source. In an interview with GameSpot in 2022, the developers were asked about
and that whole Genshin anxiety in the endgame, well, it gets thrown out by the fact that Honkai Star Rail literally fucked everything up with power creep and required you to pull new limited characters to have any chance of clearing the endgame. So yeah, that was another example of another Hoyo game shooting Hoyo in the foot with how it got ran.
adding more difficult endgame content. Their response was that they were hesitant because it might cause excessive anxiety for the players. Well, essentially, they're saying they're actively protecting the casual majority from stress. They would rather add something relaxing, like the in-game card game that nobody plays.
Genius Invocation TCG has to be one of the biggest wastes of like developer resources I've ever seen. Who plays the Genius Invocation TCG? Genuinely, I feel like the entire Genshin TCG is like a money laundering scheme so that like somebody's family at Hoyoverse could get employed adding features to a game that they know nobody uses. So it's like they'll just be on like Hoyo's payroll. It's like I'm pretty sure like, yeah, Genius Invocation TCG is like nepotism. I genuinely think it's like nepotism. They know nobody plays it, but they can like employ like some random people to work on it, knowing that nobody actually plays it.
Yes, Mondstadt's economy is powered by hopes and dreams, and also the card game. Look, Timmy, I know your dad's dead and all, but do you want to play Gwent?
Then something that makes people feel pressured. They position themselves as guardians of low-stress experience. These two ideas work together to form a carefully constructed image of a developer that seems unusually generous and deeply concerned with its players' well-being. This official framework, however, was tested early and dramatically. That first major test happened in September 2021.
What happened in September 2021?
Game's first anniversary. Expectations were incredibly high. This is partly because players players of Hoyoverse's older title, Honkai Impact 3rd, were kinda used to generous anniversary events. The community was expecting a real celebration. What they got instead was work. They got a job, which is probably a gift for most people nowadays, but what if you don't win? You just don't get paid. Instead of substantial in-game gifts, the celebration was a series of community contests for cosplays and fan art, alongside web events with lottery-based prizes. Your reward for a year of loyalty was a chance to win something.
Didn't they give out like 3 pulls? They gave out at least 3 pulls, right? For the first anniversary? It was more than that, right?
You weren't being given a gift, you were being asked to create more marketing material for free. The community's reaction was swift and massive, a coordinated review bombing campaign on the Google Play Store.
Wait, so there was no pulls?
Crashed the game's rating from a healthy 4.5 stars to below 2.
Oh, they gave you 3 sweet madams. So they gave you no pulls, but you got 3 sweet madams. And then the 7 pulls came after this.
0.0 in hours. Official Genshin Discord channels were flooded with hate and criticism that they restricted and put it on slow mode, and it's flooded with Chi-Chi emoji to show how fed up everyone was. And then it got weird. The protest famously spilled over to unrelated apps. People were leaving 1-star reviews on Google Classroom and Clash of Clans or other games like that, with comments complaining about Genshin's anniversary.
I wasn't really that caught up on the space when this occurred. I was busy off doing some other stuff with my life, but there's a reason why people still talk about Google Classroom to this day. There's a reason why Google Classroom is always mentioned whenever there's like a bad anniversary or like a bad update. Yeah, they're on the fucking they're on the lookout, bro. Google probably has like measures set up. When's Hoyoverse announcing their next game's anniversary? We gotta lock down the fucking comment section on these apps.
It was a digital riot. It was so bad that it set up a new culture for the gacha space. Every time a bad anniversary is being announced, Google Classroom will get review bombed for some reason. And this was never about players just wanting free.
My headcanon for why it's Google Classroom, that's the one that ends up getting bombed, is because that's like one of the services that like the kids that are playing the games actually use. There's a bunch of kids playing Genshin and they're really mad that they're not getting their rewards, and they know Google Classroom because they use it at school, because that was during COVID. Remember that. This was during COVID. And so there ain't been nobody in the classroom. Everybody be using Google Classroom to go to school.
It was a fundamental rejection of the relationship Hoyoverse was offering. Players felt they had proven their loyalty and support, but in return, were being treated like a marketing demographic to be engaged, not like partners who had helped build this success. The anniversary showed the community had a line, and when it comes to the game's core content, the characters, the developers' responses have shown an even more fascinating and calculated evolution. To see this evolution, you only need to look at 2 specific moments: the story of Zhongli and the story of Dea. Both were highly anticipated characters, central to their nation's stories, and released in a severely underpowered state.
Oh man, we're gonna get into the nerfs now.
A Hoyoverse hand
Or really the buffs.
them tells you everything about how their strategy has changed. First, Zhongli in version 1.1. As the Geo Archon, the hype was enormous, but on release his abilities were flawed. He did almost no damage. Like, he kicks his spear as a basic attack,
He still does no damage.
and it does no damage. He summons a meteor from the sky, and it's kind of mid. He was often worse than some widely available 4-star characters, but now looking back at the game, I guess nobody can beat our god Xiangling, right? The community's reaction went far beyond disappointment.
I'm pretty sure the biggest reason for why Zhang Li had such a like big public backlash was because like he's the god of China, because Liu Wei is China and the Archons are basically the god of the region, and they made the god of China basically kind of bad. Gotta be honest, yeah, I think it was fucking the government that made him change it, brother.
At that time, escalating into massive unified outrage and accusations of false advertising. Hoyoverse's first response
So you know the reason why Zhang Li got buffed. You probably can figure out why Dea didn't get one.
was to basically say, "You're just using him wrong. This only made things worse." Faced with a potential revolt, they did a complete 180 and announced a massive post-release buff that transformed Zhongli into one of the most powerful characters in the game. This set a precedent, an unwritten rule. The community learned that if the backlash was big enough, they could force a developer to fix a character after the release.
And that's the unfortunate part, is that Hoyoverse, by doing this, kind of set like a standard of what they could potentially do in the future. People always reference this now when a character is released in a state that they're not particularly very happy with. And the thing is that people know that Hoyo can fix it. People know that they can actually make updates, that they can make changes because they did it before. And now it's like they're consciously choosing not to, right? They're consciously choosing not to make these changes, not to buff these characters, not to take trash like Dea or trash like Siegewin and make them playable. They're just intentionally making them in a bad state, baiting people to pull on their banners, baiting people to waste money on them, knowing that they're a piece of trash.
And now fast forward to over 2 years to Dea in version 3.5. She was arguably in a much worse state than Zhongli. Her kit was a mess of bugs and abilities that worked against each other. Her damage was so low that using her was often a net loss. The community reacted just as loudly.
She's a standard character though, so I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, right?
And this time compiling exhaustive documents and videos cataloging every flaw, fully expecting the Zhongli president to apply.
The thing is, Dea was and still is one of the most prominent characters featured in the Sumeru story. Some could say that she's actually one of like the main carries of the entire storyline. And to basically see this character that people had been seeing for like a long time throughout the entire Sumeru main story quest, and then basically just see them like be intentionally designed to be a piece of shit. Yeah. I remember this. 2 years ago, by the way.
Made their case and waited for the fix. But Hoyoverse's response this time? Complete and total silence. In a way, I think this is a strategic pivot. The Zhongli buff came when the game was young, and Hoyoverse was vulnerable. The Dea decision came from a position of immense market dominance.
If Dea was released in the present day, where Wuthering Waves is a competitor, she would be overpowered. Much like how, ever since Wuthering Waves released, every single Genshin Impact character has been tier 0. I genuinely think every character since Wuwa released, every Genshin character is a tier 0 character. Is that like not true? It is true, right? Except maybe Mizuki. Yeah, cuz she's a standard character. But everybody else didn't you say Siegewin is trash? Yes, when did Siegewin fucking release? When did Siegewin release? Yeah, she's a Fontaine character. She's a Fontaine character. 4.7. Oh. So, before Wuwa released.
They intentionally broke the...
What about Xilonen? She is literally one of the most broken characters in the fucking game. What are you even talking about? What do you mean, exception Xilonen? She's fucking overpowered. Like, she's a fucking tier 0 character. You put her on the Mavuika Sitlali team, you don't even need like a 4th teammate.
Broke the precedent they had set years earlier, and sending a clear message. The era of community-forced character buffs was over. This shift points to the deeper systemic reality that governs the game, the economic engine working behind the curtain. So let's talk about that engine. You have to understand the gacha system itself. It functions less like a simple slot machine and more like a finely tuned financial instrument, likely designed with input from teams of psychologists and economists. Its job is to convert desire into spending. It starts with the odds, a tiny 0.6 base probability for a 5-star. To counter this, the game has a pity system, but the real psychological hook is the 50-50. When you finally hit pity, you only have a 50% chance of getting the character on the banner.
Okay, we're getting into psychology now. All right, Glaive.
This near miss is a powerful motivator to keep spending. According to an estimate someone made, securing a guarantee can cost as much as $365 for one character.
I'm pretty sure the Genshin Impact page itself will tell you that it goes up to 400. Maybe 365 is like the average potentially, but yeah, they even on the like the pull page for Genshin itself, it'll tell you $400.
And then there's
like 402, maybe 502. I'm not sure.
The weapon banner, which the community often calls a scam or a whale trap. For a long time, it had no ultimate guarantee system at all. Their fix was a system requiring up to a staggering 240 wishes to guarantee a weapon. It is a tool to make spending more predictable for the highest spender.
I think that's the part that really gets me. It's the fact that for so long in the game's history, they had a banner that you could literally pull that many times on, and then in their first fix to that, they made it so that the cap was 240. for a weapon. When you think about the fundamental value of a weapon, it's literally a bundle of stats and then changes one aesthetic of the character. A weapon is inherently worth less than a character. A weapon is just inherently one of like the lower value things to like have in the game from like a gameplay perspective. And it could cost you literally the price of 3 characters to secure 1 weapon, which is like, huh? How did they like in their drawing room decide that was like the type of monetization that they wanted to go with? And I guess it's like, why is it that it's only after Wu-Wah releases that that system finally goes back to a 180 to guarantee it? So like some things, right, are getting changed because I think Wu-Wah's weapon banner being guaranteed basically made Genshin's 240 pity impossible to maintain any longer. There would have actually been like riots regarding that. But they've managed to make up their money elsewhere, guys. Don't worry. Genshin reduced the pity on the weapon from 240 to 180, right? But they've also made it so that you have to now pull every single character if you still want to play the end game. Awesome. Awesome. Awesome stuff.
Not a feature for the average player. This is all wrapped in deceptive marketing. On the Google Play Store, you won't find words like gacha, gambling, or loot box, making it a minefield for parents and younger players, especially with the ease of one-click purchasing. The monetization also goes deeper. The game has known to be selling solutions to problems it creates by monetizing core gameplay mechanics. It is about pulling for essential quality of life features.
Who cares if Geo needs a rework? Who cares if Anemo needs a rework? Who cares if Electrocharge needs a rework? Let's sell the reworks. We know there are fundamental flaws with all of these teams, all of these lineups. Let's sell the rework. Escoffier, the freeze rework, where the elemental reaction of freeze literally doesn't do anything to bosses. They will get frozen and nothing will happen. But then Escoffier comes in and makes it so that freezing enemies now reduces their resistance to Hydro and Cryo. But without her, freeze teams are literally unplayable. They don't do enough damage. So without her, you can't play an entire archetype. Dendro teams, the HP inflation has gotten so high that Dendro teams no longer do enough damage to clear. But hey, you got Lauma coming in, ready to become the new Dendro Archon, because Nahida is now the second most valuable Dendro character. Just pull Lauma. Don't worry, Nahida's on her team, but Nahida's supporting Lauma this time. Lauma also has exploration quality of life. Yeah, Lauma transforms into Torrent from Elden Ring. She's like an antelope horse thing that has double jumps in the air. They're basically making it so that if you don't pull these characters, you're gonna have an awful time in the game. If you don't pull these units, you're not gonna have any fun. They've decided to make the game effectively actually unplayable because you see how much you're missing out on. You see how degraded your experience is because you're not willing to spend hundreds of dollars to keep up with the release cycle of the game. And this is what I mean when I always say that Genshin Impact has clearly, it's no longer focusing on acquiring new players anymore. They're clearly not making it a big priority for people to, you know, have even close to a semblance of like a full gameplay experience without half the limited roster. You could get this full gameplay experience in Mondstadt. You could get it in Inazuma. You could get it in Sumeru. But you want to know what Natlan, what Nod-Krai feels like? Imagine if Sumeru, you know, like those little tether points that you can go to? You press T and then you grapple over in Sumeru. Imagine if those were only available if you were using a character from Sumeru. That's what Genshin feels like now. Imagine if all of those like little blossom grapples in Sumeru that make the exploration possible, you couldn't use them unless you were using a Sumerian character. That's essentially what they've done to the fucking game. And it is just like, it's disgusting to see how the player base has like conditioned themselves to like accept that.
Cleanest example is exploration. Core abilities like grappling or improved wall climbing are now locked exclusively to limited time 5-star characters. These characters only appear on banners that rerun every 6 to 7 months, manufacturing a powerful sense of urgency, the fear of missing out. And the most cynical part, these expensive abilities are often region locked. You might pay hundreds of dollars for a character with a cool traversal skill, only to find it works at full power in one specific region. It essentially turns a permanent character into a temporary rental for the new content. And finally, there's the illusion of balance.
I think what the best part is that the exploration being region locked also adds like FOMO to it, where it's like, oh, you gotta make sure that while we're still in the 5.0 version, you gotta make sure you pull the Natland characters now, because all of the events, all of like the stuff going on in 5.0, it's all gonna be in Natland. And if you wait to pull Mavuika, you wait to pull Chaska, then we're already gonna be moving on to Nod-Krai. And so you gotta pull all the Natland units now, while all the patches are focused on Natland. Otherwise, they're not gonna be as valuable later. So pull them now. Much like how there's gonna be a lot of pressure to pull all the Nod-Krai units now. Because don't worry, they'll make it a part of the exploration, they'll make it a part of the events, and then they're about to add some new bosses, guys, where if you don't use the new lunar reactions that only the Nod-Krai characters have, then all of these new bosses, they won't be beatable, because you need the reactions to probably like make their invincibility shield disappear.
Managed through power creep. There is horizontal progression, which means getting new characters that do different things, and vertical progression, which is getting new characters that are simply stronger. In the past, Genshin focused on horizontal progression. Kazuha, for example, didn't make Venti useless, but that has been changing, especially since the release of the Dendro element, which raised the power ceiling. They managed this creep carefully so your old characters don't feel useless overnight. This avoids financial anxiety for players, which in turn protects their long-term revenue stream. This complex engine is protected by that benevolent philosophy, but it also protected by a segment of the community that defends these practices. This is where the dynamic gets really interesting, because you see a cycle play out time and time again. It usually starts with a developer livestream. A recent example was a presentation where the host proudly said, compared to last year, the rewards and optimizations this year are hitting way harder, like this masterless Stella Fortuna.
That really a quote by them? I didn't watch the live stream because I wasn't gonna sit through an hour and 30 minutes of this bastard just lying to me. This was actually said. Are they talking about the artifact loadouts? Are they talking about those artifact loadouts that they already had in the game for 2 years, and then they gave you the option to now have 2 useless loadouts instead of just 1 useless loadout, rebranded it, and then advertised it as like an actual fix? They basically did 0 times 2, which is still 0. Afterwards.
Like this masterless Stella Fortuna. Wow! In practice, hitting way harder meant getting duplicates for characters many considered B tier, and a new level cap system with punishing math. You can now level characters past 90, but only if you already had them at C6. And even then, you needed 3 more duplicates of that maxed out character to do it.
I have a question about the Stella Fortuna system. Do you need the character to be at C6 before you can level them up to 95 and 100? Or can you farm the C6 mats? Or can you like farm the mats up and then level up the character without them being C6? So they have to be C6 before they go up to 100, or they don't? You can do it without C6. Or do you need C6? I'm not super sure. You can only get the material if they're C6 plus, but you don't need them to be C6 to level them up. How would that work with 4 stars then? Well, let's just say this. If you're using your masterless Stella Fortuna on 4 stars, you're probably fucking up somewhere.
Community's reaction to this being presented as a gift was negative, with many criticizing the host for, as they put it, acting like Weasley little liars, dude. It felt dishonest. But then, the second part of the cycle begins. As criticism mounts, a predictable set of arguments emerges from parts of the community that defend the developer. There is always the classic, "It's a free game, you are not entitled." This ignores the reality of a business model that generates billions. The game is free the same way a casino floor is free to walk on. And then comes, "If you don't like it, just quit."
That's why everyone is quitting this game currently. I don't think a lot of people seem to realize this, but most people that have played Genshin Impact in like the past 2 to 3 years, they're not really playing it at either at the same levels, or they've kind of like quit, and then there's like a new cycle of players that have like rotated in. That's kind of just the situation that's going on. Is that I would dare say most of the people that are playing Genshin Impact right now are either like too casual to care about anything, or if they cared about anything, they've already quit, moved on to other stuff. And now there might be like just a new population of people that care, but then it's like they're going to end up quitting too because the game's just getting worse every single month. Maybe that's why they're adding shit in like the UGC to give those giga casual players any reason to open up the game, even if they're not going to be playing Genshin Impact.
This dismisses the criticism that often comes from the most invested players, the ones who want the game to improve. And finally, the ultimate shield.
It is a gacha game. It is always a gacha game. Of course they're gonna make money. Of course they're gonna be predatory. Blah, blah.
This argument is used to excuse any and all problems and normalize mediocrity. It is like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet and being served stale bread and then accepting it, glorping it, because that's just what this particular buffet serves.
Hey, they're used to it. They like the flavor at this point. I think a lot of people have just gotten like a little bit exhausted with the discussion over here, and they kind of just label them as illegitimate. They just label them as the shills, and they realize that there's not really going to be any level of productive conversation that's going to occur if you're even thinking about or even considering defending anything that's been going on in any of Hoyoverse's games. Why do you think Mr. Pokey is viewed as like such a clown nowadays? Because that was the guy that was front and center telling you that the developers adding in HP inflation and power creep, it's your fault. And if you're having struggles or you don't like that the developers have added 200% more HP to the bosses in a year, that's on you. That's your problem. That was the argumentation. That was how far the shilling went. And the reality of the situation is that people just view that sort of behavior nowadays, and that person, they basically just become like an outcast, right? They get made fun of. Why do you think Flip Me AC, the #1 Hoyo shill on the front lines, proving himself to be in like the, I'm just gonna be honest here, proving himself to be in the, in a very specific percentile when it comes to general intelligence, why do you think there are so many creators like that desperately trying to defend the game at every opportunity? But then this is what their channel looks like. Let me just show you guys exactly what I'm talking about right now. How's the Hoyo shilling working? Let's just see over here. Yeah, not particularly good. I think even like parts of the player base have recognized, damn, a lot of these CCs are full of shit. And it's ironic. This is actually the moment where he's kicked up like overdrive mode, started glazing Masterless Stella Fortuna, and that's also the exact moment that all of his views fell off a cliff. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of an interesting phenomenon. And then we can also see just from like other reactions, right? I'm not gonna lie, Doro had a pretty balanced take regarding it, right? Doro had some critiques. He had so many critiques actually that he had to make an apology video about 6.0 in the update. Do you want to know why? That's why. That's a lot of dislikes. And why do you think there are a lot of dislikes? You want to look at Brand Online? Let's take a look at Brand Online. Let's see what's going on with Brand Online in that video. The biggest update Genshin ever released. Guess who else was also critical about some of the bullshit getting added to the game? Even the biggest CCs are out there saying that there's something deeply fucking wrong.
It's a mindset that allows developers to do the bare minimum and get away with it. The counter argument, of course, is the call for players to be active fans, to demand better from a multi-billion-dollar company instead of passively accepting whatever table scraps they're given. This frames criticism as engagement from a community that knows what the game is capable of, and so this cycle continues. Which brings us to the central question: what does this all mean at the end? When you put all the pieces together, the Hoyoverse paradox isn't a sign of incompetence or hypocrisy. It is the business model. Hoyoverse has become a master of operating two completely different versions of Genshin Impact at the same time, within the same product. The first version is the game, the beautiful, content-rich, accessible open-world RPG that you can download and play for hundreds of hours without—
All right, Glaive, your editor needs to fucking turn the music down. I don't know what the fuck your editor is like doing, but like bro needs to just listen to this one fucking time, and it's way too fucking loud.
Spending a single dollar. It is the version filled with art, incredible music, and exploration. This is the product they advertise. But version 2 is the engine, the ruthless, psychologically tuned monetization system running just beneath the surface. The gacha, the weapon banner, the monetized quality of life features. It is a cold, calculated machine designed for maximum profit. This is the product they sell. The unprecedented success of Genshin Impact lies in their ability to keep a wall between these two tracks for the vast majority of players.
I think the main take that he's making over here, right, is, let me just try to summarize that, because I feel like we've gone through like the fucking ringer with whatever the fuck that track was. Holy shit, like it's a little bit too much. It's like Genshin's going ahead and it kind of has like this fake exterior, right? Where they're like, oh, we're so sophisticated. Oh, we're so like player friendly. Oh, what we do, right, is like we're a step ahead of these other gacha titles. Look at how well we're doing all these things. And in the background, right, they're instituting some of the most predatory systems, some of the most backhanded forms of monetization, some of the most like unwieldy, absurd, ridiculous mechanics. And you essentially get like bait and switched, where you think that you're playing a game, but instead you actually are just getting milked like a cow. And unfortunately, what it's done is it's created this sort of like extremely negative impression of just like gachas as a whole, where, well, let's just be entirely honest here, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people view gacha games badly because of Genshin Impact, because of the ways that they managed to fuck over their entire player base so many times over the past couple of years. The way that Genshin presents itself is like what Wuthering Waves actually is, right? Where Genshin wants to be like the game that happens to be a gacha, but it's mainly a game first, when in reality, the gacha is what dominates the playability of the game. Because if you're not pulling on the gacha right now in Genshin, the only thing you can play is the story. God forbid you try to do combat events. God forbid you try to do any of the endgame. God forbid you try to do the exploration without the new characters. It's like, do the story, and that's it. Otherwise, get ready to cough up some fucking cash. It's a gacha first, then a game. That's Genshin without a doubt. And I think, like, ever since Will are released, ever since the trajectory, all of that, you can see the other Hoyoverse games under the umbrella. That's only made that much more clear. And I think at this point, people have realized it's mostly the gacha. The gacha's mostly why they were playing. And when it comes to, like, the fundamental game, not a lot of people are really having fun anymore. But that's what happens when, instead of actually improving your baseline game, all you do is look for more opportunities to monetize. And the fact that they're now selling reworks to the elements, reworks to Dendro, reworks to Electro, reworks to Freeze, that they're selling those instead of just putting them in the game, you can clearly see what it's like playing Genshin when you play and what it's like when you don't. It literally feels like Genshin actually reminds me the most of like RuneScape, where you can be like a member in RuneScape, right? And then you unlock like 90% of the quests in the game, like half the skills you can't even level up until you're like a member, all of that. That's what it feels like in Genshin now. If you're not willing to pay at a baseline, it feels like half the content in the game just doesn't even feel right, doesn't even feel playable anymore. Honestly, you gotta pay a lot more in Genshin than you would in RuneScape anyways. So, yeah, just excited for more paywalled mechanics, more bullshit, more posts from people saying that they're gonna quit this game. Because I think that the cycle that they gone for is absolutely unsustainable at this point. That'll be that, ladies and gentlemen. Great vid by Glaive. Actually, I'm not going to call it great. I'm going to say it would be a great vid if the fucking background music mixing wasn't fucking so bad. So, yeah, I'll just make a really big point to say, fix the music, bro. I know your editor is watching this. Fix it, bro. All right, so yeah, that's why that's in there, just so that it's, you know. Let me know what you all think. Peace.